We've got a few more glimpses into the depth of the Tyranid hive mind today, with a look at the stats for some of their new units. Let's see what the Neurogaunts and Barbgaunts can do on the table. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're covering Games Workshop Tyranid rules. As I'm sure just about every Tyranid player out there will know, there's a big new box coming called Leviathan. In that box are several new and updated units for the Tyranids. Some of them we've already seen the datasheet for, like that fearsome looking Screamer Killer, and some of them are complete mysteries like the Neuro Tyrant and that Psychophage monster. Today though, Games Workshop's giving us a few answers as to how a couple of those might work, a look at the profiles for the anti-infantry cannon that is the Barbgaunt, and the Synapse Vassal Swarms that are the Neurogaunts, so let's take a look at what these guys are going to be doing on the table. First up we've got the Tyranid Barbgaunts. These guys are basically gaunt platforms with a great big gun on the back. As GW had teased to us before, the gun is indeed called a biocannon. Nice and simple, even if that kind of feels like the generic weapon word for the Tyranid weapons. I suppose now that phrase specifically refers to this, as well as the whole lot of them. Basically these things are Tyranid gaunts, but with a great big heavy weapon attached to them. They do look slightly sinister even for Tyranids in the way that they're kind of plugged into them with one hand and walking awkwardly on those three tripod legs. Perhaps even more so than the Biovore, little more than living artillery pieces, kind of enslaved to the weapon beast. I guess that if they'd been released in 9th edition or before, they probably would have been a heavy support choice for the Tyranids, another flavour of Tyranids carrying some big guns. From the pictures of them and the unit teasers, we know that they come in squads of 5. There'll be 5 of them in that Leviathan box, and 5 will feature in the Tyranid combat patrol that you can build from it. And these beasties are going to be carrying into battle the biocannon, this thing being quite an anti-infantry gun that apparently bursts with great big shards scattered into the enemy army, apparently earning them their name. Each gaunt gets a shot with 24 inches, d6 shots, strength 5, AP 0 and damage 1. As it goes, a fairly light anti-infantry profile. No AP means it's going to have limited effectiveness against Space Marines. It's got the heavy keywords, which means that if you're stationary then it'll be hitting on a 3+, though if you move it'll be hitting on a 4. And it is an entire squad with a blast keyword, so that could be particularly nasty going into big hordes and things. If you fired off a full squad of these against something like a 15 or 20 man unit, that's going to be a whole load of extra shots. With only a 24-inch range, I feel like they're probably not going to reliably get that +1 to hit. They might need to move to get line of sight, or just remain out of line of sight until they get to shoot. Though I guess if you do happen to be playing an army that's got a lot of light infantry moving forward, then it's going to be good news for them. If you're firing their guns into the enemy, then this is the rough damage output for 5 of them when they're static, each of them getting d6 shots hitting on a 3+, and this is before any other buffs like those adaptations that they can do, things like lethal hits on vehicles or sustained hits against infantry. The damage profile is a bit skewed. Against a unit like Termagants, you'd be killing on average 8 of them. That's assuming 2 extra shots per gaunt due to 10 models in the unit there. Should pretty well ruin that unit from then on. Against more heavily armoured things like Space Marines though, it's going to be far less good. Only 1 or 2 intercessors assuming 5 models, and only 1 wound to a Terminator with the big 2+ save, again assuming a squad of 5 models to target there. In terms of their raw damage, that AP 0 just isn't very flexible. It's going to be good against hordes and only doing chip damage to other things. From Games Workshop's preview today though, it looks like it's that Disruption Bombardment that's going to be the most interesting thing. This appears to be the single unit ability for the Barbgaunts, and that's going to be the Disruption Bombardment, meaning that as well as just being efficient anti-infantry killers, these guys are going to be kind of annoying for slowing down big important units in the enemy's army as well. It is a little bit specific, only being able to affect infantry, so I guess it's going to be kind of matchup dependent as to how relevant that is. But if your opponent does happen to have an infantry-focused big unit of Doom, this could really come in handy. Basically, you get to pick one unit that's been hit by one of the biocannons. That unit must be infantry, and in the opponent's turn they get a -2 to their movement characteristic, and also subtracting 2 from advance and charge rolls as well. If say you targeted a great big Chaos Terminator Death Star or something like that, or maybe the same for some Necron Lich Guard, or Leagues of Votan Ironhair Hearthguard, you potentially could slow down that unit really quite a lot, potentially keep them out of melee for a turn if that extra 4 inches is going to make the difference of a charge, and potentially that could just have enormous value if you do slow down something very, very powerful. It's really quite an easy access debuff to be able to shut down the enemy like that, and I feel like this unit could be interesting enough to maybe just have 1 copy of in the army. That way you're not over-investing if your opponent doesn't have any light infantry, but it could be pretty handy to have that rule in effect if the opponent's got something that it would be really good into. Still though, I would kind of say that their damage output isn't super exciting from this preview. I'd hope that the unit would be at least fairly cheap in cost to be able to field it. On a gaunt platform as well, I can't imagine that their defense is going to be super good, so hopefully they wind up being usable. Moving on to our second unit preview, and we have the Neurogaunts. These guys are again a little and rather creepy version of Tyranids. Basically little parasitized gaunts with that neurocyte thing on their back. The main gaunts don't seem to have any eyes, so I guess the will of the synapse is doing all the talking here. And from the previous images that we had of the squad, it looks like you get squads of 11 of them, including a node beast. I did suspect that just from seeing the models, they wouldn't really do all that much in terms of damage or defense. Their armor's really quite light, and they're basically toughness 3 with a 6+ armor save, really not that hard to kill. And then melee is super weak as well. Basically being termagants but without the gun, only getting a single attack, hitting on a 4 at strength 3, AP 0, damage 1. They're definitely a far cry from Hormagaunts. The selling point for these guys definitely isn't going to be what they can add to raw power of the battle line. They look like they're a utility unit. Kind of annoyingly, I sort of suspect that Games Workshop might not have told us the entire picture on these guys so far. The only major thing that they said from their rules teaser is that it looks like they'll be able to push out synapse range to a bigger range, which I guess does look like their datasheet rule, unless they're one of the units that gets 2 of those. Now synapse does look like a useful ability to have. I believe that the rule is if you're within 6 inches of it, then you'll be taking battle shock on a 3d6 rather than a 2d6. Really quite critical for a lot of the Tyranid units that are leadership 8 if they want to hold some objectives. Being within synapse means that they've got an 83% chance to pass leadership 8 battle shock, so that's really quite nice. So don't get me wrong, it is going to be important for the army. I just do kind of wonder whether or not it's really going to be all that big a deal coming on a swarm like this. If you do want to gun them down, it's probably not going to be the hardest thing to do so, even if I guess you probably want your shots going into more important things. But still, at least currently, I feel like Tyranids aren't super struggling for good synapse units to include in the army. Things like warriors, zoanthropes, and hive tyrants are useful enough to have along, and I guess that winged prime will be an option to have some more of it flapping around. If that's all they do, I suspect that's really not all that impressive. But in previous articles, Games Workshop had said that the fluff behind these is that they're basically bound to a synaptic organism, they act as vassals, and they throw themselves in the way of enemy damage. To me that kind of implies that they're probably going to do something in a bit of a bodyguard type capacity as well. I kind of wonder whether they're going to have a rule for Tyranid organisms to join them as a leader type unit. Hopefully they will have some sort of rule like that. I kind of like the idea of a synapse unit having a big vassal swarm that can tank some damage for them, otherwise they'd either have to be just ridiculously cheap or looking kind of awful to me. Just a chaff screening unit that can broadcast some synapse a bit. Maybe not the worst thing in the world, but I feel like Tyranids have quite a lot of different options for swarms already that can do that quite well. Overall, out of the previews so far, I feel like the Barbgaunts probably aren't going to be a great general purpose pick. Probably not wanting to spam tons of them, but perhaps one unit for the debuff would be good. Neurogaunts, I'm kind of hoping that they'll have another rule like a leader type rule, perhaps shielding a synapse organism from enemy bullets. Let me know your thoughts though down in the comments. I'll be interested to hear your guys' takes on these. What do you make of Games Workshop's Gaunty preview? In any case, if you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep any more news of the Tyranids coming for 10th edition, and we'll hopefully get a chance to do a few unit reviews once we actually get the full rules for these guys. Finally, if you've been enjoying all the videos on the channel quite a bit, and you'd like to help keep them coming, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.